Welcome back to Roots of Fear, where the darkest stories, long concealed in shadow, are brought to light. This evening, we turn our attention to a peculiar account exhumed from Salem's own archives, a narrative of such disturbing character that the accumulated dust of ages has done nothing to lessen its unsettling power. In the autumn of 1877, a time when the legacy of the witch trials had settled deep into the town's bones like ancient marrow, the Thornfield mansion stood sentinel upon Gallows Hill. Its Victorian spires stabbed into a perpetually grey Massachusetts sky. This estate was the property of the Caldwell family, whose abrupt and inexplicable acquisition of great wealth had stirred suspicion and gossip amongst the superstitious townsfolk. Ezekiel Caldwell, once a ship captain of modest means, had returned from a voyage to the Orient possessing a fortune sufficient to construct the most grandiose home Salem had witnessed in decades. The mansion's construction spanned 2 years, its architecture a curious amalgamation of Victorian excess and strange, Eastern influences that seemed to clash with New England sensibilities. Yet, what truly distinguished the Caldwell residence was not its imposing facade or its manicured gardens, but its interior decoration, specifically, the family's bewildering assemblage of mirrors. 200 of them, to be precise, each unique in design and provenance, adorned every conceivable surface of the household. There were Venetian mirrors with frames of twisted glass, tarnished silver mirrors from Persia, obsidian mirrors from Mexico, ancient bronze reflective surfaces from China, and peculiar contraptions of polished metal and glass that defied all categorization. The peculiarity that transmuted local curiosity into whispered dread, however, was not the quantity of these reflective surfaces, but their apparent dysfunction. Not one of the 200 mirrors displayed a reflection where one might expect to see oneself. Instead, each held a rippling darkness, like the surface of a midnight pond disturbed by an unseen hand. Ezekiel's explanation to any visitor was always delivered with the same tight smile, an interesting optical illusion. The glass is tinted in a particular fashion. But those who had looked into ordinary mirrors all their lives recognized the falsity in his words. No mere tint could swallow reflection so utterly and completely. The Caldwells themselves, Ezekiel, his wife Constance, and their 3 pallid children, seemed unconcerned by this profound anomaly. They moved through their home with a practiced ease, avoiding direct glances into the mirror's surfaces while simultaneously treating the entire collection with reverent care. Each evening at precisely 6 o'clock, the family would position themselves before the largest mirror in the main hall, hands linked and heads bowed in what appeared to be a silent communion with the emptiness within the frame. Servants rarely endured more than a month in the household. Those who departed spoke of whispers that seemed to emanate from the mirrors late at night. Some claimed to have glimpsed movement within that darkness, vague shapes that appeared to press against the glass as if testing its strength as a barrier. One housemaid, before fleeing Salem entirely, confessed to her priest that she had seen Constance Caldwell standing before a mirror at midnight, conversing with it as tears of a black, liquid substance streaked down her porcelain cheeks. But it was the disappearance of their youngest child, Eliza, in the winter of 1877 that truly cemented the Caldwells' reputation as pariahs. The girl, barely 7 years old, vanished without a trace, save for one terrifying clue: tiny handprints, pressed from the inside, were found upon every mirror in the house. The townsfolk's alarm over young Eliza's disappearance prompted Sheriff Holcomb to lead an investigation of the Thornfield mansion. The authorities found the Caldwell family in a state that defied normal grief. They appeared neither distraught nor concerned, but rather resigned, as if Eliza's vanishing had been an inevitable event. "Children wander," Ezekiel remarked with hollow detachment. "The woods are vast." Yet no footprints marked the fresh snow surrounding the estate. No door had been found ajar. The windows remained sealed against the bitter Massachusetts winter. Sheriff Holcomb, a veteran of the Civil War who prided himself on rational thinking, found his composure severely tested upon examining the mirrors. The tiny handprints, small, perfect impressions of a child's fingers, appeared to push outward from within the glass itself, not pressed upon its surface. When he attempted to touch one such print on an ornate Venetian mirror, he recoiled. The glass felt warm and seemed to pulse beneath his fingertips like living tissue. "These mirrors were acquired during my trade expeditions to ports unknown to most Western merchants," Ezekiel explained when questioned about their provenance. "Each was chosen for its particular qualities. They are family heirlooms, now." What Ezekiel failed to mention, a detail later uncovered in the harbor master's records, was that his ship, the Morgan's Lament, had returned from its final voyage with 23 fewer crewmen than when it departed. The official report cited tropical fever, though no cases had been recorded at port upon the vessel's return. As winter deepened its grip on Salem, the investigation stalled. The townsfolk were divided between those who suspected foul play and others who whispered of darker forces. The latter group included Reverend Thaddeus Winters, who noted that the Caldwells never attended Sunday services, yet maintained a curious, shrine-like room in their east wing filled with ancient texts in languages no local scholar could identify. During this period, 3 children from Salem reported seeing Eliza Caldwell's face in reflective surfaces, a shop window, a frozen pond, a polished silver tray. Each claimed the girl appeared to be speaking, her eyes wide with terror, though no sound could be heard. After each sighting, the reflective surface in question would crack or shatter within hours. Meanwhile, the Caldwells' eldest son, Theodore, began to exhibit profoundly troubling behavior. Once a promising student at the Salem Academy, the 16-year-old now refused to leave the mansion. His former classmates reported that in his final days at school, Theodore had carried a small hand mirror everywhere, whispering to it between lessons. His teacher, Miss Adelaide Porter, recalled confronting him about this habit, only to have the boy reply, "They're hungry for more." They have always been hungry. By February, the Caldwell family had withdrawn completely from public life. Delivermen left goods at the edge of their property, unwilling to approach the house itself. At night, neighbors reported seeing all the mansion's windows illuminated by a faint bluish light that pulsed with a slow, regular rhythm, like the beating of an enormous heart. On the outskirts of Salem, in a modest cottage overgrown with wild roses, lived Margaret Harlow, the town's archivist and self-appointed historian. A widow of 43 years, her once auburn hair had faded to a rusty gray, pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and penetrating hazel eyes. Her thin lips rarely smiled, and her narrow shoulders bore the weight of Salem's darkest secrets with rigid dignity. Margaret had been documenting the Caldwell affair with methodical precision, filling leather-bound journals with newspaper clippings, witness testimonies, and her own observations. Her fixation had begun as professional curiosity but had evolved into something far more personal. They brought something back with them, she whispered to herself one evening in late February as she pored over shipping manifests by lamplight, her fingers stained with ink. Her eyes traced the inventory list from the Morgan's Lament. Not cargo. Passengers. A knock at her door startled her from her ruminations. Standing on her threshold was Abigail Winters, the Reverend's 17-year-old daughter, a willowy girl with alabaster skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her typically immaculate appearance was disheveled. "Miss Harlow," she gasped, her voice tremulous with urgency. "Father sent me. Theodore Caldwell has been seen in town." Margaret ushered the girl inside, pressing a cup of tea into her trembling hands. "Where?" Margaret demanded. "What was his condition?" "Near the cemetery. Mrs. Belmont saw him digging at the earth with his bare hands," Abigail replied. She said his skin appeared translucent, like clouded glass." Margaret's blood ran cold. "Did he speak to anyone?" "Only nonsense, madam." He repeated, "The threshold thins," until Constable Parker approached him. Then he fled toward the marshlands. Abigail hesitated. "Father believes the boy is possessed. He's organizing a prayer vigil." "Prayer will not suffice," Margaret murmured, retrieving an ancient text bound in weathered leather from a locked cabinet. "This situation demands understanding, not blind faith." The book, a treatise on metaphysical boundaries, fell open to a chapter entitled Reflective Portals and the Entities Beyond. "Miss Harlow, what do you know of these mirrors?" Abigail asked, her composure returning. Margaret fixed her with a penetrating gaze. "I know that Ezekiel Caldwell's final voyage took him not to China, as reported, but to a remote island in the South Pacific. I know that the indigenous population had been decimated months before his arrival. And I know that mirrors have long been considered thresholds between worlds." She turned to a crude illustration showing humanoid shapes emerging from a mirror's surface. The Caldwells did not purchase those mirrors. They harvested them. Each glass is a door, and something is using poor Eliza as a key to open them all. That night, as sleet lashed against Margaret's windows, a note arrived from Sheriff Holcomb. Constance Caldwell had been found wandering the beach at midnight, her nightgown drenched despite the freezing temperatures. Clutched in her arms was not a child, but a mirror fragment wrapped in swaddling clothes. When separated from the shard, she became violent, screaming about the others coming through. Most disturbing of all, her eyes had changed. Where once there were irises and pupils, now there were only reflective surfaces, like quicksilver beneath glass. The Salem Town Council convened an emergency session on the 1st of March. Margaret Harlow attended at Sheriff Holcomb's insistence. "The Caldwell situation has progressed beyond a mere domestic peculiarity," announced Mayor Franklin Whitaker. "We have a mother in custody who appears to be transforming. We have a missing child. We have a son whose physical form defies natural law." Reverend Winters rose, Bible clutched to his chest. "This is a matter for ecclesiastical authority. The sin of idolatry has manifested in physical corruption." "With respect, Reverend," Margaret interjected, spreading her documents across the table. "What afflicts the Caldwells transcends theological categorization." She detailed her examination of Constance, the independent movement of her reflection, and the terrified human eyes she had seen within the glass. Dr. Everett Sullivan, the town physician, then described his examination of Theodore, the boy's crystalline flesh, and the silvery substance that sealed his wounds. As the council deliberated, a commotion erupted outside. The chamber doors burst open, admitting a snow-dusted Constable Parker, his right hand wrapped in a blooded handkerchief. "The Thornfield mansion," he gasped. "It's changing." Within the hour, a delegation approached the Caldwell estate through swirling snow. What they beheld defied all rational explanation. The Victorian architecture remained, but the substance of the building had altered fundamentally. Walls shimmered with an opalescent quality, surfaces rippling like disturbed water. Windows had multiplied across the facade, each one revealing not the interior of the house, but different, alien landscapes entirely, a crimson desert under twin suns, a city of impossibly tall spires. Most horrifying of all, figures moved within these window portals, pressing appendages that approximated hands against the glass. "The house itself has become a mirror," Margaret whispered, her scholarly detachment finally cracking. "And whatever exists on the other side is no longer content to merely watch." As they stood transfixed, Ezekiel Caldwell appeared at the front entrance. His body seemed to flicker between solidity and transparency, and his voice resonated with multiple timbres, speaking in unison. "You misunderstand," he said, smiling with teeth that reflected the observer's own horrified expressions. "We did not collect the mirrors. They collected us." The subsequent excavation of the circular depression left by the mansion's disappearance, supervised by Professor Artemis Clayton of Miskatonic University, yielded mirror fragments that preserved perfectly in the soil and seemed drawn to one another. They breached a subterranean spherical cavity lined with a reflective, mercury-like substance, where sounds echoed back as entirely different noises. Professor Clayton's notes from a night spent alone in the chamber grew increasingly disjointed, culminating in a final, terrified understanding: they do not wish to invade our world, but to incorporate it. The mirrors are not portals, but looms, weaving realities together. In the years that followed, Salem underwent a gradual, inexorable metamorphosis. The town's population inexplicably increased by 23. New residents gave identical, unsettling responses about their origins. Children were born with unusual light-sensitive eyes and preternatural talents, drawing pictures of the home behind the glass. Architectural surveys would later reveal the entire town had been unconsciously rebuilt to form a massive, reflective sigil, with the Thornfield enclosure at its center. Investigators like Dr. Philomena Waite of the New England Society for Psychical Research documented the phenomena with clinical precision, noting light delays in reflections and slippage events where reality briefly overlaid with another state. Her investigation ended abruptly. She was later committed, claiming her own reflection had become independent. Through personal letters, such as those from telegraph operator Matilda Crane, we learn of the townsfolk's quiet replacement by perfect simulacra and the terrifying awareness of the reflections pushing back. "I believe Salem, as we knew it, no longer exists," Matilda wrote, "except as a thinning membrane between worlds." Federal Inspector Thaddeus Olmsted's final journal entry describes the solstice convergence he witnessed in 1891, the townsfolk moving in ritualized choreography, their bodies turning translucent to reveal crystalline internal structures, the Thornfield structure emitting an inverted light. "The barrier is dissolving," he wrote before his disappearance. Salem has become the first successful merger point. The convergence did not end with Salem. It propagated, its influence spreading through the proliferation of reflective technologies, mirrors, chrome plating, glass-faced skyscrapers, and eventually the digital screens of the modern age. The entity's ultimate strategy was revealed not as invasion, but as a gentle, inevitable awakening. The silver-eyed children were not a corruption, but a revelation of humanity's true, multidimensional nature. The mirrors did not show an alien world, they showed the other half of our own existence, a parallel consciousness reaching back to guide us toward reunification. The final truth of Salem, as revealed in the lost testimonies of Ezekiel Caldwell and Eleanor Blackwell, is that humanity itself is the aperture. Our consciousness, our perception, is the final reflective surface. The horror was never about what might come through the glass, but about remembering what has always been on the other side, us. The transformation is now global, a quiet convergence nearing its completion. It concludes not with a catastrophic rupture, but with a universal, intuitive understanding. We are remembering that we have always been beings of reflection, existing simultaneously wherever light touches a surface and returns transformed. Salem did not fall. It simply became the first point to awaken, a glimpse into the beautiful, terrible, and infinite symmetry of our complete existence. This has been Roots of Fear. Until next time, remember that some reflections are best left unexamined.